Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into something truly uh, game-changing in personal health, the amazing world of wearable biosensors, and specifically how they're really looking poised to shake up transplant care.
It's a fascinating area.
Absolutely. If you, or maybe someone you know, has had a solid organ transplant, a kidney, liver, pancreas, you get it. It's not really an endpoint.
No, not at all. It's the beginning of a lifelong journey.
Right, a journey needing constant, really careful monitoring to make sure that new organ stays healthy. But the problem, historically, has been that the usual ways we monitor things like blood tests every so often, imaging, sometimes even biopsies.
They're just snapshots, really, isolated points in time.
Exactly. And they can easily miss those really early, subtle signs. Maybe rejection starting or drug toxicity.
Which is a big deal.
It leads to hospital readmissions way too often. And, a lot of those could probably be prevented. It's this big gap in care. Patients, doctors, they're often playing catch up. So our goal today, give you a kind of shortcut to getting up to speed on this really cutting edge tech.
And that's our mission for this deep dive, really. To unpack how these wearable, sometimes even implantable biosensors are aiming to fill that gap. They promise this sort of anytime tracking of vital health markers, moving us way beyond those periodic checkups.
Towards continuous home monitoring.
Exactly. And truly personalized care. It's a fundamental shift.
Okay, so let's dig into the core problem they're tackling. It really boils down to a very, very delicate balance, doesn't it?
It really does.
Transplant folks need lifelong immunosuppression, drugs to stop the body rejecting the new organ. But some of these drugs, like tacrolimus or cyclosporine, they have incredibly narrow windows where they work safely and effectively.
Super narrow. It's like walking a tightrope. You need just the right amount.
So how delicate is that balance? What happens if it's off, even a little
It's
off?
incredibly delicate. Too little drug and bang, your immune system starts attacking the new organ. That's rejection. Too much drug. Then you're looking at serious side effects, maybe nasty infections because your immune system is too suppressed. It can be just as dangerous.
Wow. So the consequences can be pretty severe.
Absolutely. Organ rejection, hospital stays, even potentially losing the graft altogether. It's this constant high-stakes negotiation going on inside the body.
And that really highlights why the old way, the episodic monitoring, just falls short.
Precisely. You get these isolated snapshots, but you miss the continuous story. You don't see the dips and peaks happening between lab visits.
Okay, let's unpack this tech then. What exactly can these tiny sensors actually pick up on? And maybe more importantly, how are they doing it? Let's start with, well, probably the most critical piece, monitoring those immunosuppressant drugs.
Yeah, the therapeutic drug monitoring, or TDM.
Right. We're seeing these wearable TDM sensors emerge. They use something called electrochemical transducers.
Sounds fancy, but the concept is fairly straightforward.
Yeah, think of them like tiny detectors. They basically turn the presence of a drug molecule into an electrical signal you can measure.
And they often use these really clever biological bits, things called aptamers or antibodies.
Like molecular magnets.
Kind of, yeah. Highly specific ones. They're designed to latch onto only the drug molecule you're looking for.
And they can do this right in your sweat or in that fluid just under the skin.
Interstitial fluid, yeah.
Yeah.
Or ISF, that's the idea. Detecting it right there, non-invasively.
So the big takeaway here for drug monitoring is this shift, moving away from just a few blood draws a year
Which are inconvenient, sometimes painful.
to potentially getting continuous or near continuous readings right off your skin, or even from saliva.
It's a huge leap.
Imagine these electrochemical aptamer sensors, maybe on a little skin patch, just constantly sampling and measuring.
There's even a prototype called MedMeter. It uses a smartphone app, analyzes saliva or sweat.
Colorimetrically or electrochemically, right?
Yep. And gives you tacrolimus levels in minutes. No blood draw needed.
That's not just about convenience, is it? It's about real-time adjustment, precision medicine.
Exactly. It could drastically cut down the risk of rejection or toxicity because you can react fast.
And the future sounds even wilder. Fully integrated systems, maybe with AI adjusting doses automatically.
That's the long-term vision for some researchers, yes, a closed-loop system. But beyond just the drug levels, these sensors are also getting really good at sensing immune biomarkers.
Ah, so picking up the body's alarm bells.
Pretty much. When you get early graft rejection or maybe an infection brewing, your immune system kicks into gear. Levels of things like cytokines, these signaling proteins or acute phase proteins, they start to rise.
And the idea is that wearables could detect that rise, maybe even before you feel symptoms.
That's the hope, catching problems earlier.
Okay, give us an example.
Well, some electrochemical sweat sensors are being developed specifically for inflammatory markers.
Like that work by Chu and colleagues. The fabric patch.
Right, using carbon nanotubes and graphene electrodes. Built to detect IL-6, which is a key inflammatory cytokine, right, in sweat.
And there are those sweat-aware devices, too.
Yes, they measure several things. CRP, IL-6, TNF-alpha, all inflammatory markers, again, in sweat.
And they tested those in liver disease patients.
They did. Pilot studies showed these sweat markers were significantly higher in those patients compared to healthy controls. It suggests it could be an early warning sign.
Okay, this all sounds incredibly promising. Almost too good to be true sometimes.
Well,
I imagine there've got to be some, practical hurdles. Like, when you're measuring stuff in sweat,
yeah.
how well does that actually match what's going on in the blood? That's where doctors normally measure things. Is there a catch?
Ah, you've put your finger right on a key challenge. It's a really important question. Correlating sweat levels accurately with blood levels. Well, it's still a very active area of research. It's not always a perfect one-to-one match.
Is that quite straightforward?
Not always. For example, one study looking at CRP found, let's say, a modest correlation, R squared of about 0.39, something like that.
So modest, meaning sweat doesn't perfectly mirror blood all the time.
Exactly. There's variability to consider. Sweat rate, skin temperature, other factors can influence it. But, and this is important, even if the absolute numbers don't match perfectly, the direction of change in sweat can still be very informative.
So if the level is trending up in sweat, it's likely trending up in blood too, even if the exact values differ.
That's often the case. It can still act as a valuable early indicator, a warning flag. Needs careful interpretation, though.
Got it. So we've got drugs, immune signals. What about the organ itself? How do we know if the new kidney, for instance, is actually, working?
Right, the graft function.
This brings us to those metabolic indicators. For kidneys, doctors always watch creatinine and urea levels, right? Classic signs of kidney function.
Exactly. And guess what? Wearable patches have been prototyped to measure those too.
In sweat or ISF again?
Yep. Creatinine is there in sweat, though maybe less than in ISF. Urea is actually pretty abundant in sweat.
Interesting.
And for pancreas transplants, we actually have a fantastic real-world example already.
You mean continuous glucose monitors? CGMs.
Precisely. Things like the Dexcom systems. They are already widely used, providing real-time blood sugar monitoring.
And that's huge for managing diabetes after a pancreas transplant.
It's a game changer. It really shows the power and potential of continuous sensing when it works well and gets adopted. It's a successful model.
Okay, so we've covered what they measure. Let's switch gears a bit. How does the magic actually happen? What's the tech behind these sensors?
Yeah, let's dive into the tech, because there's actually a fascinating range of sensing methods being used. It's not just one approach.
Okay. Probably the most common type you hear about are electrochemical sensors. We touched on these.
Very versatile.
They're pretty clever because they convert that binding event, the drug or cytokine sticking to the sensor directly into an electrical signal, something you can easily measure.
Right.
And this category includes different types, like enzymatic sensors, those aptamer or antibody-based ones we call magnets.
Immunosensors, yeah.
And also direct voltammetric detectors, which use voltage changes to identify things.
The real beauty of electrochemical methods is how well they can be miniaturized.
Right. You can build them into flexible things like skin patches or even integrate them into fabrics, stuff you can actually wear comfortably.
Exactly. Makes them very practical for wearables.
Okay, so beyond electrical signals, some sensors use light. Optical sensors.
Yep, using light properties.
Think of these like, tiny flashlights and cameras maybe, shining light through the skin or tissue.
And then analyzing how that light changes as it interacts with the tissue or the molecules within it, like absorbance or fluorescence.
A really cool example is an implantable near-infrared oximeter.
Ah, yes, measuring oxygenation.
It's basically like that pulse oximeter clip they put on your finger in the hospital.
But designed to be inside the body, near the transplanted organ.
Right. Continuously measuring how much oxygen is in the tissue, your pulse, heart rate.
Giving doctors a real-time window into blood flow and tissue health, crucial after surgery.
Definitely. Then you mentioned sweat-based microfluidic sensors earlier.
Yes, those are quite ingenious. They're patches, often, that have these tiny, intricate channels built into them, microfluidics.
To collect the sweat.
Exactly. They collect the sweat and funnel it precisely over the sensor electrodes.
And this design lets them measure multiple things at once.
That's a key advantage, yeah. Multiplexing. You could measure glucose, lactate, electrolytes, maybe even some of those biomarkers, all from the same sweat sample in the same patch.
Smart. But you mentioned the trick is needing continuous sweat flow.
Right. That can be a challenge. You often need to be exercising to produce enough sweat naturally.
Or they use that chemical stimulation.
Pilocarpine iontophoresis, yeah. Using a tiny, usually imperceptible electrical current to gently encourage localized sweating with a mild chemical.
So the sensor always gets a fresh sample.
That's the goal. Designing the microfluidics to ensure fresh analyte is constantly flowing past the sensor is key.
Okay, moving slightly deeper than sweat. You talked about interstitial fluid, the ISF sensors.
Using microneedles.
These sound a bit intimidating, microneedles.
They're actually designed to be minimally invasive, tiny, often painless needles. They just barely get through the very outer layer of skin.
To sample that fluid just underneath.
Exactly, ISF. And they can continuously sample it.
And what can they pick up there?
Potential for lots of things. Glucose, certainly, lactate, even some drug molecules have been shown.
And the big plus here is that ISF might be closer to what's in the blood.
That's the thinking, yes. Analytes in ISF often correlate better with blood plasma levels compared to sweat, so potentially more accurate readings for certain things.
Got it. That makes sense.
And then, the really cutting-edge stuff often combines different methods, these multimodal patches.
Best of all worlds.
Trying to be. For instance, you might have a wearable monitor for, say, a tissue flap after reconstructive surgery.
Okay.
That combines photoplethysmography that's using light to see blood volume changes, like your pulse, with maybe colorimetric imaging to check tissue color and thermal sensing to check temperature, all in one patch.
Wow. Like a little diagnostic team working together.
Exactly. Each sensor providing a different piece of the puzzle, giving a much more complete picture of tissue health.
So, all this sophisticated tech, what does it actually mean for healthcare, for the patient experience? Connectivity seems absolutely key here.
Oh, it's central. Absolutely crucial. Without connectivity, you just have data stuck on a device. Nearly all these sensors are designed to pair up with your smartphone, or maybe a dedicated little reader module.
To beam the data out.
Right. Then mobile apps can show you your readings in real time, maybe give you alerts if something's trending the wrong way.
And send that data where it needs to go.
Exactly. Up to secure cloud servers and then onto dashboards that clinicians can access and review. It closes that loop between patient and provider.
We've got concrete examples, right? Like the sweat-aware patch.
Yeah, transmitting its data via Bluetooth to a phone and the cloud in just seconds.
Or the Mentimeter app we talked about, getting drug levels back in minutes. This isn't just pie-in-the-sky stuff.
No, clinical studies are already putting these pieces together. Look at the Reboot 2.0 trial.
How are they doing?
They're integrating smartphone apps with wearables, tracking heart rate, activity levels, and feeding all that data into machine learning algorithms.
To do what?
To try and predict things like rejection risk, infection, or graft problems in transplant patients based on those combined data streams.
Whoa! Predictive analytics based on wearable data. That leads into that whole concept of digital twins, doesn't it?
It really does. Building a virtual model of your body's responses using your own real-time data.
To personalize therapy like never before.
That's the ultimate goal for immunosuppression, yes.
Now, I imagine getting all this data smoothly into electronic health records, into the daily workflow of doctors and nurses.
Yeah.
That's probably still a work in progress.
It definitely is. Integration is a major hurdle, technically and logistically. But proof-of-concept platforms do exist.
Showing it's possible.
Yeah. Systems for two-way communication between patients and providers, cloud-based analytics. The foundations are being laid.
And it all points toward that idea of a closed-loop system eventually.
That's the vision. Biosensor readings, wireless transmission, mobile app analysis, all converging to help tailor drug dosing for that specific individual right then and there. True precision medicine, potentially automated.
Okay, this sounds incredibly transformative.
No.
But let's be realistic. It can't all be smooth sailing, right?
No, absolutely not. Despite all the promise, there are significant hurdles. Big challenges still need to be tackled before these technologies become routine in clinics. It's definitely not a silver bullet yet.
Right. Good to keep that perspective. So what are some of those key challenges? What's holding things back?
Well, first off, there's biocompatibility and just plain stability. Things you wear on your skin, or especially things implanted under it, need to be safe and gentle.
No irritation, no allergic reactions.
Right. Microneedles, implanted probes, they carry risks of the body reacting against them, inflammation, irritation. And the sensors themselves, the chemicals or biological
It
parts,
could break down over time.
they can degrade, yeah, lose their accuracy or stop working altogether. Long-term stability is a big engineering challenge.
Okay. What else? Accuracy must be a big one.
Huge. We touched on this with sweat versus blood. Readings from these surrogate fluids, sweat or ISF, might not perfectly match what's in the bloodstream.
And lots of things can throw them off.
Definitely. Your sweat rate changes, skin temperature fluctuates, other molecules in your sweat or ISF like uric acid, even vitamin C, or changes in pH can interfere with the sensors and skew the results.
So you need really careful calibration.
Absolutely. And maybe even personalized conversion factors for each patient to translate, say, a sweat reading into a clinically meaningful blood equivalent value. It adds complexity. Then there's the challenge of continuous sampling. For true continuous monitoring, you need a constant flow of fresh sample to the sensor.
Which is tricky for sweat when you're just sitting around.
Exactly. Sweat sensors can struggle at rest, sweat production slows way down, and old sweat pooling near the sensor can mess up the readings.
And that ionophoresis thing, the electrical stimulation.
It helps, but it's usually an intermittent process, not truly continuous 24/7. And microneedles, while they avoid the sweat issue, need to stay stably inserted and powered for long durations.
Makes sense. And then there's the human element, right? Patient compliance.
Oh, absolutely critical. We can design the fanciest sensor in the world, but if patients won't wear it or don't wear it correctly,
It's useless.
pretty much. It needs to be comfortable, unobtrusive, easy to use. This isn't like tracking your steps for fun. It's for managing a life-sustaining therapy. Adherence is key.
And even if some designs are really advanced, like that Northwestern kidney implant you mentioned, designed to be ultra-thin, less than 70 microns.
Which sounds amazing from an engineering perspective.
Real-world long-term adherence outside of a controlled study can still be a major variable. People get tired of wearing things.
They do. And finally, there's the data itself. Handling these massive, continuous streams of data is a challenge in itself.
How do you make sense of it all?
You need validated real-time analytics. You need robust systems for privacy and secure data transmission. And you need to present it to clinicians in a way that's actually useful and doesn't just overwhelm them. Creating user-friendly dashboards is a big piece of the puzzle.
It's lots of hurdles.
Definitely. Real significant challenges. But,
Yeah.
and this is the encouraging part, the field is moving incredibly fast. Current prototypes, early clinical trials, they're showing remarkable progress. It indicates that these hurdles, while tough, are being actively tackled and hopefully overcome.
So let's ground this a bit. What are some real-world or nearly real-world examples that listeners might find interesting?
Okay, well, we mentioned that Northwestern University work by Rogers and colleagues, that ultra-thin implantable temperature sensor for spotting kidney inflammation. That was in an animal model, but shows the potential for early detection right at the organ level.
Very cool.
Then there's Tomioka and colleagues' work, a wearable multi-sensor patch looking at tissue perfusion, blood flow in microvascular flaps. That actually went through a clinical trial showing feasibility in people.
Okay.
We talked about the sweat-aware system, too, that wrist or torso patch measuring CRP, TNF-alpha, IL-6 in sweat for liver disease patients. That was a pilot study, again showing promise.
And the Metameter.
The smartphone-based paper sensor prototype for tacrolimus, still early stage, but very innovative.
And maybe the best example of success already out there is the Dexcom G6.
Absolutely. An FDA-approved, widely used subcutaneous glucose monitor. It proves that reliable, continuous sensing that integrates into patients' lives is achievable. It sets a benchmark.
So when we wrap all this up, look back at this deep dive.
Yeah.
The potential is just staggering, isn't it?
It really is.
Enabling truly personalized, real-time management of immunosuppression, real-time surveillance of the graft. It's a whole new way of thinking about transplant care.
A complete paradigm shift, potentially.
Yeah.
And, that's really where knowledge becomes powerful. Not just knowing something, but seeing how it can be applied to make a real, tangible difference in people's lives. This deep dive, I think, really highlights how technology is pushing us closer to that reality. Moving healthcare from just reacting to problems.
Being proactive, preventing them.
Exactly.
So here's a final thought for you listening out there. Imagine a future where your health journey after a transplant isn't just about doctor's visits and hoping for the best between tests. Imagine actively co-piloting your own well-being, using real-time, continuous insights streaming directly from your own body.
It changes the whole dynamic.
It really does. And think beyond transplant for a second. What could that level of continuous personalized information mean for preventing or managing other chronic conditions? Where else could this revolution take us? Something to ponder.